The wheelman of McDonald County. The dirt road that wound back to Chester Poe's place was so narrow and so overgrown that a stranger might have passed it a dozen times without knowing it was there at all. The cedars and the sycamores leaned in close on either side, and in the wet months, their branches dragged across the wagon top like fingers trailing in water. However, Chester knew every turn of it, every rock and root and soft place where the ground went spongy after a hard rain. And Hallelujah knew it too, the old gray mule having navigated those ruts in every season and every kind of weather for more years than either of them cared to count. The house itself sat back in the timber within sight of the Elk River, and there were mornings when the mist came off the water and wrapped itself around the porch posts and the wood pile, and Chester would stand in the doorway with his coffee and feel that the whole world had been reduced, not unpleasantly, to just his little patch of McDonald County. It was 1903, and Chester Augustus Poe was 60 years old, which meant he'd been born into the tail end of a harder time and had come up through years that left marks on a man the way weather leaves marks on fence posts. His father, Aldous Poe, had come into McDonald County with a crosscut saw and a broadaxe and the stubbornness of a man who intended to stay. He'd felled the timber and notched the logs and raised the house with the help of neighbors who came from as far as Anderson for the work and the meal that followed it. Chester had been born in that house before the chinking was fully dry, and he'd lived in it every year of his life since, through boyhood and marriage and middle age, and now into the long, quieter years that followed Verina's passing. The house knew him, and he knew the house, every settle and creak of it, every place where the floor gave slightly underfoot, and every window that swelled in the August heat and had to be persuaded to open with the heel of a hand. He'd added a room when he and Verina married. He'd repaired the roof twice and rebuilt the porch steps once, but the bones of the place were his father's work. They were sound bones that had held for more than 50 years without complaint. He'd lived most of those years within hollering distance of Lanigan, Missouri, and he knew this country the way a man knows his own hands. Every ridge and hollow and creek crossing, every farm and the family on it going back 2 and 3 generations. He'd been repairing wagons and wheels and harness leather since his daddy taught him the trade, and there wasn't a spoke or felloe or trace strap in the county that he couldn't diagnose with a look and a touch. When Verina was alive, she used to say he could hear a bad wheel the way other men heard a sour note in a hymn, and she wasn't wrong about that. She wasn't wrong about much. She'd been gone 2 years now, 2 years come November, and the house had taken on the unmistakable quiet of a place where laughter used to live, the kind of quiet that settles into the walls and stays. What saved him some mornings was Sam. The old yellow dog had been Verina's as much as his, a broad-headed, easy-tempered animal who had decided shortly after her passing that his job was to stay close to Chester and take up as much of the wagon seat as a 60-pound dog reasonably could. Sam rode beside him every day of his rounds, ears flopping in the breeze, and nose working the air with great professional interest. He was getting gray around his muzzle himself, and he slept harder than he used to, but he was still good company in the way that a dog is good company, which is to say constant and uncomplicated and entirely without judgment. Chester would get Hallelujah hitched by 7 most mornings, Sam already occupying his portion of the seat, and then he'd climb up, gather the reins loosely in his hands, and reach into the bib pocket of his overalls for his Hohner harmonica. It was old and dented, patched once along the cover plate with a strip of tin, and he played it the way he did everything else, without hurrying and without showing off. The music drifted back through the cedars as the wagon rolled out onto the county road, old tunes mostly, gospel and folk songs that had come down through the hills on nobody's lips in particular, songs that seemed to belong to the land itself rather than to any one person. Hallelujah appeared to tolerate this, which, from that mule, constituted something close to approval. His rounds took him all through the county, up toward Anderson and out past Rocky Comfort and down into the creek bottoms where the farms sat low and the soil ran dark and rich. He didn't keep a schedule that would mean much to a man with a pocket watch, but the farmers knew he'd come around, and they'd been saving their broken things for him, propping a cracked wheel hub against the barn wall or hanging a split trace strap on a nail where they'd remember to show him. He'd pull into a farm lane and set the brake and step down, and Sam would follow at his heels. Then the farmer would come out with a recognizable relief of a man whose equipment had been troubling him for weeks. Chester worked slowly and talked while he worked, or rather, he told stories. And this was what the county knew him for, as much as the wagon work itself. He had a gift for it, the way some men have a gift for music or figures. And he drew on 60 years of Ozark living the way a good well draws on deep water, steady and clear and seemingly without bottom. He'd tell about the big flood of 1882 that tore out every low-water crossing in McDonald County and left the Elk River running red with hill clay for a week afterward. He'd tell about the circuit preacher who baptized 30 souls in the river on a January morning and didn't lose a one to the cold, though he came close enough himself that they warmed him with a quilt and a jar of something the deacons pretended wasn't there. He'd tell about bears and panther cats and feuds that started over fence lines and ended over supper tables, and droughts that cracked the creek beds open like old pottery, and the time a twister lifted a chicken coop clean off a farm out near Pineville and set it down right side up in a neighbor's pasture, chickens still inside and only mildly aggrieved by the whole business. The children loved him best of all, and they'd gather around whatever wheel he was working on, sitting in the dirt with their chins in their hands, watching his draw knife curl the wood into pale ribbons and listening to him talk. Their mothers let them stay because Chester Poe's stories were the county's own stories and worth more than a morning's chores could ever be. When it came time to settle up, money was often the last thing that changed hands, and Chester didn't press for it. The country was hard in 1903, and cash was scarce. He understood that a man who made himself useful had to understand the economy of the place where he was useful. He'd take a basket of sweet potatoes or a peck of dried beans, a fryer chicken wrapped in a flour sack, or a smoked ham hock, and now and then a small shoat that would ride squealing in the wagon bed behind Sam. Sam regarded these pigs with a weary and philosophical tolerance he'd developed over many such trips. Chester kept a kitchen garden in the same plot his father had broken ground on 50 years before, and he put up what he could and managed well enough on his own. The farmers never forgot what they owed him, paying it back in one form or another when their season turned good. Evenings, coming home, the harmonica would come out again. The light in the Ozarks went slow and golden in the late afternoon, laying itself across the hillsides and the river in a way that could stop a man's breath if he let it, and Chester freely accommodated it. He'd play something quiet and let Hallelujah find the last mile home without direction, Sam leaning warm and heavy against his leg, and the smell of the river rising up through the timber to meet them. When the house came into sight through the trees, he saw it the way he'd seen it 10,000 times and still saw it fresh. The way you see a thing that has always meant home and always will. His father had built it with his hands, and Chester Augustus Poe had been born inside its walls and had loved a woman there for 40 years. Whatever the coming years held, he intended to die there too, in the same county, in the same timber, and within sound of the same river that had been running past since before any of them arrived. He didn't let himself think too hard about the empty rooms waiting at the end of the road, the chair that was still Verena's chair, whether he liked it or not, the hook by the door where her coat had hung for 40 years. He thought instead about what he'd seen that day, the slant of October light over the ridge, a red-tailed hawk riding a thermal high above the valley, and the face of a child lit up at the part of a story where everything came right. There was grief in his life, a steady and abiding grief, but there was also this, the road and the work and the county he knew by heart. A man could carry both things at once if he was careful about how he held them. Chester Augustus Poe had learned that much at least, in 60 years of Ozark living.